Hello, Vermont History students, and welcome to my basement. I wish I could give you a tour of my, but the camera's not very ambulatory. We have keyboards here and drums and then guitars lying all over the place like this. And this is the music room in the house, and this is the place from which I will, generally speaking, be making these videos. And what I'm going to do for you, Vermont History students, is the course is divided into 12 units. It's a 6-week course, and you want to think of it as being 2 classes a week. Like if I was teaching it on campus, it would be like Tuesday and Thursday. Although, because it's an online course and there's no required time for you to be online, they think of each unit, there being 2 each week, as constituting Monday and Tuesday, and then Wednesday and Thursday. Okay? And so for each of the 12 units, I will make a movie like this, and the goal is to keep them really short. Some people don't use video online courses. Some people make like hour-long, 2-hour-long lectures. I try to keep these to like 10 minutes at the most. And so I think that's a good amount of time. It's not taking up too much of your time. And I won't use it to lecture. What I'll do mostly is I'll just sort of introduce the unit that's coming up, talk about some issues that may exist in the course, and generally do some housekeeping. And so the goal is to keep these short. There's some deadlines for you. The 2 major deadlines pertain to your responsibilities in taking part in class discussion, which is the most important thing this course is all about, class discussion. There are going to be discussion forums, and for each unit I'm going to ask 1 or 2 questions. That could be answered either way, history questions, and you have to go on by, for the first unit, by Wednesday at noon, and for the second unit of the week by Friday at noon, in order to respond to the questions. And then also we will have town meetings, which are a virtual online thing where I'm going to give you identities this semester. They're uphillers and downhillers. Uphillers being sort of like hill farmers, downhillers being like lawyers. And I'm going to give you primary documents and divide you in half and then have you argue with each other. And responses to a town meeting are due by Monday at noon of the previous week's town meeting, because they cap off the week. That's not true of the 6th week, because the course ends on Friday, so we'll have that last town meeting by Friday. But generally speaking, you'll write discussion answers on Wednesday, on Friday, and then on Monday, by Monday you'll have town meeting. Obviously you can do it before then. Would be great. So here's the deal. This is the first ever online course I've taught at LSC. It's the first time I've used Moodle so intensively. Usually all I do is just put articles on it or something. But the whole course is going to be run through Moodle. I've been playing around with it. I haven't gotten any help from anyone, although resources are available. I'm just too lazy to bother. And so but I figured it out. I need to have forums, and I need to have a couple other things. So what I want you to do now, in order to begin the course, number 1, is make sure you have the textbook. The textbook is Freedom and Unity by Michael Sherman, and you need to have that. Textbooks are important in in-person classes, but in an online class, they basically take the place of lecture. So you really need to get Freedom and Unity. Then go to the website. Introduce yourself. There's an introduction forum, and I think 4 of you have already signed in at this point, which is about 1:30 on Friday, and that's great. Everyone come tell us what you want to learn about and where you're from. The syllabus is up there, and please review the syllabus, and then if you have questions about the syllabus, I'd prefer if you'd put them the questions into the forum located up there for questions about the course and the syllabus, because other people may have the same questions. And what else is up there? Announcements, introductions, questions. Oh, and the assessment paper assignment, although I'm going to deal with that on the next unit's movie. Because you don't have to write the first one of those till next week, so don't stress out about that at this point. Then, beginning on Monday, between Monday and Tuesday, digest Part 1 of the course. And Part 1 of the course has a outline, and the outlines are meant to not be lectures, but to be short and give you learning outcomes and give you the point that I want you to get out of the material during that. I'll tell a story or two out of that unit. Also, there will be images, and there will be other assorted things, but that's the main thing. Is what you want to do is you want to go and read the unit outline after you've read the textbook. I think that's the case. I want to hope you know that being the first time I've taught on Moodle, I'm going to do some experimenting and see what works and what doesn't work, and we'll just stay in touch about what's working and what isn't. Okay, so Unit 1, and just if I can briefly explain it, what I want by the end of it, by Wednesday morning, is for you to respond to these two discussion questions. The unit itself covers the years from about the early 1760s to 1775, and that's when the Westminster Massacre happened in Westminster, Vermont. And the point of departure for this section is the founding experience of Vermont in the early 1760s, and the end goal of it is for you to understand where the cats who wrote the state constitution were coming from, because they established for the state that it wouldn't just be a political entity, but it would be an idea, an experiment in human living. The attempt to reconcile, the state motto is freedom and unity, and Vermont's the attempt to reconcile the most basic contradictions of the human experience. Everyone wants to be free to pursue their goals. Everyone wants to be equal and in a strong community where people, practice restraints on behavior. And Vermont's founders promised that Vermont would be a place where these forces were reconciled. So where they come from, well, the main thing is that you focus early on in the west part of Vermont, and the governor of New Hampshire in the 1750s started handing out land grants, although it wasn't possible to settle in those area between the Connecticut River and Lake Champlain. The French and Indian War, then by the early 1760s, makes settlement of that land possible, and people moved there on the basis of those New Hampshire grants. New York contested New Hampshire's right to hand out that land and thought it should be the three most eastern counties of New York. And the two parties complained to the Privy Council in England, in London, who had a lot of other problems at the time, and they gave that jurisdiction to that land to New York. And the Yorkers, the people who settled on New Hampshire grants, who were from New England, not only didn't want to have to rebuy their land, but also there were a lot of things about the nature of New York society that they found objectionable, and New York politics. So what sets off is this conflict over whose land titles are most valid. In 1769, in the Albany court case, it was declared that people would have to rebuy their land or get off. And that initiates the great era of the Green Mountain Boys. That's the early 1770s. And the east side of Vermont, which we'll get into more next time, had a reputation for being more pious, larger family groups, wealthier group people, cut off by the Green Mountains from the West conflict. And they tended not to be so opposed to New York authority until the Westminster Massacre. And so find out what that is, and then what you want to do is think towards the Revolution, which starts right then, and the writing of the Constitution. And I have two things that I want you to ponder. And the first one, of course, is that you have to understand that the founders of the state, it's an incredibly ambiguous to us what they were like. It's a pre-capitalist context, and what they wanted, they lived in a very different world from the way that we intrinsically see the world. And you have to wonder, well, what did they want? And it's important to see them as ambiguous, because people have used them, and you'll use them in town meetings, all through Vermont's history in order to support their points. They appropriate the legacies of the founders. And if Ethan Allen was here today, he'd be for school consolidation. He'd be against it. So you need to sort of think of them as people that you can use in order to make any argument you want. Okay? And a good measure of this ambiguity, very briefly, is the fact that I used to be on the board of trustees of this thing called the Ethan Allen Homestead. Ethan Allen was a big revolutionary hero. And Ethan Allen moved to Burlington late in life and died, and this historian in the 1960s, looking for where Ethan Allen might have lived, went over there and found this old house, took off the vinyl siding and the additions, and it was a 1780s house. And so it opened up as the Ethan Allen Homestead. It was right near where he supposedly had lived. But we're not sure it's actually his house. It's in Burlington. Not sure it's actually his house, but does it really matter? It's a great historical site. Tourists and school children come and get that experience, and it, glorifies the name of that icon, Ethan Allen. But it might not actually be his house. Does it matter if it's his house, though? Is it okay, or should it be called like maybe it was Ethan Allen's house, but maybe it wasn't? The second question is about what the people who founded the state wanted, and that's because their mentality was shaped by something called a game called provide land for your kids. In colonial America, there was lots of land, as long as you could genocide out the Indians, and very few people, so America grew out and not up. And you would if you were around then, you would get born, and then your dad would sell the land where it was scarce and expensive near the coast, buy it in the interior, settle you with your brothers around there, and then you would farm there, and then when you had reached maturity and you had kids who wanted land, you could sell where it was now expensive again, buy where it's cheap in the interior, constantly moving away from the coast. And by the time you get to the founding of Vermont, we've had 5 generations from the Great Migration in the 1630s of people playing provide land for kids. And I want you to wonder, what does that do to people? They're constantly on the move, but it keeps America very rural. And so does that, the game of provide land for kids that colonial people play, does that make people innovative and creative, competitive, innovative? Or does it make them like traditional things? Do they want to basically escape the coast in order to continue to live the way that their grandpas lived? And that's what I want you to tangle with on the website, and I'm going to go back and check the site now, and I hope that you're all going to love this course, and that I hope that it's going to go really well, because I'm new with the technology, but we'll communicate a lot as time goes along. All right, that's it.